Well, for some, this session is something of a shakedown for the shootout, especially, of course, for those top 10 qualifiers. The other qualifiers, those outside the shootout this afternoon, they've got a bit of a different perspective. What about this man? He had everything in focus yesterday. Greg Murphy became the man with the fastest ever V8 supercar lap around Mount Panorama at 2:07.95 in a mad scramble that chopped into the record books at the end of the qualifying session. I guess, Neil Crompton, the question is, are we going to see those kind of times? I know we won't see that mad scramble, but will we see those kind of times in this session?
It's possible. You never know. Each team has got their own program, but there tends to be a happy hour in these sorts of sessions. They'll still have some tyres to cycle. There's 6 sets of tyres, 24 tyres allocated this weekend. The idea is that you want to go into the shootout with a brand spanking new set, maybe with the very lightest of light rubs. But you'll see the times come down. Tanda, for example, at the moment has just done a 9.3, but for 30 of the cars in this field, it's the last decent chance to give both drivers some solid laps and to also make sure you end up with a car that's comfortable to drive around Mount Panorama. And that might seem like a strange term with a racing car, but you need to be able to stroke around here very quickly with a lot of rhythm and flow without having to use up the car. One of the Orcon cars has gone off there on the exit of the chase. And you'll hear a lot of drivers talking about that, trying to make sure that they've got a car that they know they can push hard without eating it up.
I've heard a report from the pits that there's a bit of smoke inside car 1. He's definitely backed off. Not quite sure what the problem is. Todd Kelly at the wheel. So maybe one of the boys down in pit lane will give us an update on what the situation is there.
Well, they're not going to know until they have a good look at it. And yeah, so for some of the runners in this little shootout at the moment, it's a bit strange. They'll probably divide the time, I think, Matthew, that between trying to fine-tune the car in its race configuration versus also just making sure it's pretty well tweaked for the shootout. Of course, in qualifying, you had the other advantage yesterday of having at least 50% of the traffic out of the way. So one of the obstructions to doing a good time in this session is that you've got all 40 cars out there, and with everybody in a different program and scrambled up on the track, it'll actually be quite difficult to get a good, clean, fast lap round here without somebody tripping you over.
It's interesting what you were saying about the guys having to get the cars comfortable. A number of the teams I was talking to this morning, they're all saying the same thing. Yeah, we're almost there, but the car's got to be easy to drive. It's got to be easy to drive, otherwise over 161 laps, you're fighting more than you need to.
Greg Rust in pit lane. Rusty?
Matty just standing by down at the Holden Racing Team pit waiting for Todd Kelly to come back in. They spent a bit of time at the beginning of this session changing front springs in this car. Mark Scaife rated it about an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10 at the moment, car 1. He reckons they can extract more from it. And they're trying to generate a better flow in the car across the top of the mountain, make it a nicer race car in his eyes. Now, I'm just wondering in that change whether perhaps the car, the wheels may be hitting the shotgun panel now and generating some of that smoke that they're talking about. We'll have a clearer picture when car 1 comes in.
No, not really after I started the cruise rail, but definitely worth checking.
It's headed your way right now, Greg. So Todd Kelly pulls into the very first garage in pit lane. Holden Racing.
Just came up sort of from behind the seat past the driver's door. It smelled a little bit oily type of thing.
This is what practice sessions are for, aren't they? You want to see these
And it's important
bugs here and iron them out.
Extremely important for the drivers to tell the technical crew every single thing.
It's not oily, that's why I turned the trans pumps off. Oh, there was like this oily smelling smoke coming in through the car here.
Mechanics now having a look under the car to try and find the source of that oil smoke that Todd Kelly was talking about.
Possible causes?
Oh, look, you could run off.
Stable, it's pretty good.
You could rattle off a pretty long list. You know, the cars, from a television viewpoint, we tend to see them as an assembled unit, all looking beautiful on the racetrack. Of course, these race cars spend the majority of their time disassembled. You know, if you go down to the pit bunker at any given moment over this weekend, you see a car that is just in 1,001 pieces. So finger trouble is often the cause.
Up at Stone Brothers Racing, there's a little bit of work going on as well, and Daryl Beattie can fill us in on that, Daryl.
Yeah, it's interesting wandering up and down pit lane at the moment. The Morris team also were doing some front shock changes in that car, and now I'm up at Stone Brothers and doing exactly the same. I know yesterday afternoon they changed the whole shockers in this car, but it had a harder spring in the front, and they're doing it again right now. I'm not sure exactly what spring they've gone to, but a lot of teams playing with the front end of the car.
Daryl, I reckon that there's a lot of teams and a lot of combinations out there at the moment that have got pretty good cars for the one-lap sprint, but I reckon there's a lot of unhappy cars when it comes to the ongoing performance of these vehicles. And I had a good look around the circuit in the last couple of days, and there's some very nervous motor cars, particularly with regard to the way they do or don't look after their rear tyres. And that's going to be a real factor here. It's no good having a car that'll punch out a 7 or an 8 for a lap or two and then burn you down into the 11s or 12s a few laps later. That's what they'll be focused on at the moment.
Macro and Hossack, car number 5, the Ford Performance Racing entry. These guys are down hovering in 21st position on the practice timesheets at 2:13.02. Their best today. They've been into the 2:10s in qualifying. They've qualified 25th for the race.
2:10.1, the best time. I was talking to the boys this morning, actually. Pretty comfortable, pretty happy with the car. They're both pretty evenly matched in terms of their individual driver lap times. Stephen Johnson.
This car yesterday down at the Chase, Stephen Johnson and Warren Luff, was the car that spent the longest at the 7,500 hard cut on the rev limiter, just going through the Chase. And Dick Johnson was one of the people at the end of last year that was suggesting to Tiga and Avesco that they run a taller diff ratio here. At the moment, we use the tallest of the 3 diffs available for the category at this racetrack. It's a 3.25, and they're just literally running out of legs at the bottom of the straight. It's just a little over 290 kilometres an hour. It depends exactly how you got your gear calibrated as to the precise number, but call it 293, 294 or whatever. But Stevie was on the limiter for, I reckon, a good 150 metres, which is not a particularly nice thing for an engine when they're so finely tuned and so finely balanced. They go out of harmony when they're banging away like that, and if you do it for 161 laps, they have a chance to rattle itself to death.
This man will be the first man out in the shootout this afternoon. Stephen Johnson, qualified 10th. He'll be partnered with Warren Luff, the Sydney racer, and they finished 16th at Sandown. But of course, everything in this practice session pretty much happens. Look at the wiper creeping up as the car gets up to 296 kilometres an hour, maximum speed down Conrod Straight. Everything happens in pit lane. Daryl, you've got a question.
Yeah, it's interesting, Crowley. I'm down here watching. I'll just come around to the Winterbottom car. It's come in. They're playing on the rear end on this one as well, but completely different to the front of that car. I noticed, I spoke to Mark this morning. He was saying his Konica car, the AU, felt a little more positive and plush around here, but it's probably, you'll see it better than me, Cromley, here through these pictures, but looks like they're playing with like a twin weight rear spring. They're taping them together, so they're 2 different springs.
Yeah, what they've got there, I didn't actually look at it ultra carefully, but it's either a keeper spring, which effectively gives you a dual spring rate. That didn't sound good. So a lot of people are going through this process at the moment, and even this late in the week, there's still a lot of fiddling going on. So it goes back to what we were saying before about cars that are unhappy, and the BA Falcon, most of the key performers in these vehicles are saying that the car just gives me that nervous feeling at the rear at the wrong spot, and both Bradley and John were talking about that. JB doing a bit of motocrossing there. It's pretty radical, wasn't it? And John and Phil Curtis, his engineer, were more comfortable with the car in this case than, say, for example, Bradley, and he said, it just makes me feel a little bit nervous in the rear. I don't know whether or not we're going to be able to stroke it as nicely as I want to. He's just done an 8.8, by the way, so at the moment there's not a lot of stroking going on. He's just flat out in the thing. These guys will be strong again this weekend, as they have been here in the past couple of years. The combination in this team represent the fastest ever qualifying and the fastest ever lap record. Look at that. Yeah. Just about out of road there, JB. He was one of the guys that came through the Chase yesterday here in 3rd gear. Many people use 2nd.
Oh, look at the air time on the Aussie Mail Falcon.
She had to think about staying up there, didn't it? Down boy.
That was a 2:08.88 lap for John Bowe. Makes him the fastest in this practice session at the moment. Paul Wheel in the Team Brock car number 50 entry is 2nd at 2:09, and Scaife and Kelly's car is in the ditch.
Wow. There's shit everywhere, guys.
Todd Kelly behind the wheel.
All over the track.
On the the entry to pit lane.
Well, looks like that problem he was talking about has got worse.
No, he said there was something all over the track.
Yeah.
Something going on back up the road there.
Oh, what's going on here? Car 1, absolute blistering speed in qualifying.
Couldn't even see the rear view mirror coming next on.
I think he's talking about this smoke continuing inside the car. He said there's rubbish everywhere inside. Rusty, can you give us an update?
Well, Marco, they're a bit quiet on this issue at the moment, as you can appreciate. Mark Scaife chatting with Todd Kelly there now, but there's a definite smell of oil coming out of the car. And at this point in time, perhaps a bit of a feeling or a sense of disappointment in this team. They don't want this at this time of the day and in the build-up to the 1000.
Remember that they don't have to nominate which car they're going to be in until midday Saturday. Although it would be highly unlikely at this point now to do a car change. So whatever the issue is, they'll fix it. There'll be some logic to all this, but it's unsettling, it's annoying at this point in time. All of the key teams and drivers are cross-entered in this race. So there are 4 drivers entered in car 1 and car 2. They can switch them around accordingly. I want to know why Todd was what looked to be sort of off the road. So is it hosing oil on its rear tyres? And is that what carted him off the road? Or why was the awkward pit entry then?
Well, they're still trying to discuss it down in the Holden Racing Team car number 1 garage. They've got their hands full already on race weekend. Will they get it fixed? Do they know what the problem is yet? We'll try and find out after this break on the Bob Jane T-March 1000 coverage on Network 10.
You're about to see what disturbed Todd Kelly so much in the number 1 Holden Racing Team Commodore. That was the smoke he spoke of. Was in the cabin as well. Now, he overshoots the entry to pit lane here. Has to make a dramatic left-hand turn. Not sure about the legality of that, but more importantly, there's a safety issue as well if there's oil coming out of that car. So, in hindsight, it might not be a bad idea to get that thing off the track. Very gingerly taking this car back into pit lane. He was concerned about it. They looked at it, couldn't find any immediate problems. Now, they are all over this car. And sure, if they do find a solution, that's great. But the problem is they've lost about half an hour of precious practice time. Greg Rust has Todd Kelly.
Well, Todd Kelly, it's obviously been a bit of a chance to talk with the engineers. Any school of thought on what might have caused car 1 to be forced to go at the back?
Well, there was a fair bit of smoke coming inside the car. It smelled a little bit like gear oil. So really, at this stage of the game, you know, I didn't want to stay out there and press on just for the sake of, you know, doing a time or whatever. So they've got it back in the garage, and if it's a simple fix, we should have it back out at the end of the session.
Bit of a nervous moment for you, I guess, when the smoke came inside the cabin, was it?
Yeah, I got on the brakes pretty quick and pulled into pit lane. So I did, you know, if it was leaking a fair bit of oil, not to get any on the track. But you know, it's not a real drama. We should get on top of it.
Good on you. Better you found out about it now too, hey?
Exactly.
Cheers.
Definitely better the devil you know. Saturday morning glitch is much better than a Sunday afternoon hiccup. And as Billy mentioned, the HRT crew all over car number 1, inside and out. It's a race against time. Uh-oh, Larry Perkins up at the top of the mountain and crunch at the cutting. Oh, big impact from car number 11. And he's a disappointed man inside the cockpit. Oh, it didn't look as though there was anyone else around him. The question is, what led to that? He's put a severe dent both on the front of his car and also that gate there at the on the right-hand side of the track. So we can expect a fairly lengthy delay. Questions. How did it all happen? Lock up. A little bit further back. Oh, touches the wall.
It's just on the braking approach to the cutting, which is turn 4, and just prior to that, we used to run right up against a rock face there at turn 3. There's a wall there now, but if you get wide here, Matthew, you can see how dirty the track is offline. There's no grip out there at all, and for some reason, Larry is well